This is the Creative Show, episode number 10, take one. We're broadcasting live from two places, thanks to the magic of the digital age. From the epicenter of content marketing movement and my basement in New Jersey, we're bringing you the only live show from the Content Marketing Institute, where every executive holds their breath and hopes we don't say anything that will end up trending on Twitter. For the next 30 minutes, we own the airwaves together. So get thee to thine keyboard, share your comments, and join the live event. My name is Buddy Scalera, and I am a content strategist focused on visual storytelling, a content engineer building intelligent content solutions, and a professional comic book writer. I'm joined by Content Marketing Institute's own creative director, their lead designer, and the last Jedi Knight stationed in Cleveland, Joe J.K. Kalinowski.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Buddy Scalera. How are you doing today?
We are doing well. I've got my fall spirit on. You see the leaves are falling, the orange is in the air, and I feel like we are ready to be creative.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So I'm going to take this off just because it's hard to hear with the leaves rustling in my ear. Today, our episode is called Real World Design and UX. Joe, we talk a lot about user experience. What exactly is user experience and why is it important?
Okay, well, first let's get the 30,000-foot view of user experience. I'm going to read to you the definition of user experience from the Interactive Design Foundation. Okay. And it's a little wordy, but then we'll break it down. Okay, so UX is the process design teams use to create products that provide meaningful and relevant experiences to users. This involves the design of the process of acquiring and integrating the product, including aspects of branding, design, usability, and function. But you know what that really means? When you get an idea for a product, you start thinking of how the user is going to experience that product and use that product from the beginning of when you're starting to develop it, through the branding, through the design, through the testing, all the way to the end when the user actually gets involved and interacts with the product that you create.
Joe, that is an awesome explanation. And I know that you have always talked about the fact that UI, UX, design, they all operate in the same ecosystem. And I think what we want to do now is unpack a little bit about UX and how it exists in the real world. I understand that we have two experiences of UX in the real world, one incredibly good and one incredibly bad. What do you think, Joe? Which should go first?
So let's look at our buddies Joe Polizzi and Robert Rose and call this our rants and raves section. Okay.
Okay.
And Buddy, I'm going to give you the rant this week. So I'm going to throw it your way first.
All right. So for those of us who have teenagers, we have had to teach other people how to drive a car. And while driving a car becomes intuitive with repetition and practice, if you really stop and think about it, the transmission itself is a terrible design. Amanda, can you pull up the photograph that I sent over to you? This is the stick shift in my car, and ask yourself if this is intuitive for a user experience. Not does it make sense because we've learned to make a sense and learn to work around it, but if you actually had to design something from scratch, would you have it be P, R, N, D, where you do most of your driving, and then 2 and then 1? Let's pull that off the screen. Joe, what are your thoughts on the stick shift user experience and design?
Well, it's so funny you bring that up, Buddy, because I could still remember my driver's ed classes. Do you remember when it was called Prindle? Park, reverse, neutral, drive, low? Because everybody just assumed you were going to be driving an automatic transmission car. But, you think about that, and for a new driver, and I'm going through it right now with my youngest is learning to drive. And it's a scenario, she did question, why are they in this order?
Right.
You're putting reverse before neutral and then drive low and the lows. It doesn't make a whole bunch of sense, especially if you compare it to a lot of stick shift cars, like manual transmission cars, which are kind of going the way of the dodo. in all the manual transmission vehicles I've always had, your reverse was all the way over and down because it was away from your forward moving gears. So why would you put reverse as the first in the order? It's not a great UX.
It's a terrible UX. And just pull that up, pull up on the screen one more time for us, Amanda. I can tell you, I have remembered in my life hitting the D into neutral accidentally, right? Like if you're a new driver, this particular one is on the dashboard, so it's close to the radio. So if you're bringing your right hand up to change the radio, you could knock it out of gear. This is a terrible design. This is an example of engineering over user experience, right? It maybe makes sense for the transmission, the way the transmission is aligned. And we learn to function with this user experience, but really it's a terrible. And just 1 second, Joe, just 1 second. You know what? The 5-speed or 4-speed manual makes total sense, but who looked at the floor of the car and said, you know what? We need a third pedal there, right? We have 2 legs. You know what would be a good idea? If there's always the pedal that you can't reach without taking your foot off another, like it is such a bad design. And when you have to teach it to a new driver and you're like, no, there's really are 3 pedals. And
oh my God.
You only have 2 legs.
You know, buddy, just as we talk about retro things all the time on this show. Imagine if you were driving in the 30s when you actually had an additional handle. So you were using 3 pedals and your gear shift, and you had to adjust your spark with another handle on your steering column. So like if you were going up a bigger hill and you needed more power, you had to adjust your spark so your spark plugs would work better.
But
so
Joe,
you're
talking about the 1930s. We're coming up on the 2030s, and we still have this archaic system of P, R, and every time you explain it to a new driver, they're like, "Wait, but that makes no sense." And you're like, "Yeah, no, it doesn't." And it's not like, well, and what is 2 and 1 below drive? Like, how often do you go? Oh, let me go into 2.
And you know what's crazy, buddy? You said something very, very solid right there. And going from the beginning back to when you were discussing about how the transmission works and all that stuff, it ties into how many people these days with their branding and their marketing and their content building it around something that's already built. And, we just do it that way. It's harder for us or it's harder for the end user, but we just do it that way.
So Joe, I was ranting. I believe you have a rave. I thought the rave that you brought up was wonderful. Why don't you tell them about a good user design?
Okay, well, I was talking about antiques and going old school. So I'm going to take us back 130 years to the simplest. This is the craziest thing. I was just thinking about this. You and I were talking about this before. Yeah. The best user experience that has not changed in technically 100 years is the toaster. The simple toaster that's sitting on your countertop in your kitchen. The original electric toaster was designed in 1890s. You and I were discussing how did they make toast before the electric toaster? Well, it was put it in the broiler, put it in the oven, and you had to stand there and watch it or it was going to burn up. So back in the early 1890s, they developed the first electric toaster. But then in around 1919, there was a man named Charles Strite, and he was sitting at his lunch cafeteria or at the cafeteria for lunch at his machine shop where he worked, and he wanted toast, and they always kept burning his toast. So that's where the idea sparked. I'm going to make a toaster. So by 1921, he developed the first dual element toaster where you put it down in and involved minimal human interaction. You press it down, it heats it, it cooks your toast, it shoots it back up after a timer. He got it patented, and then by 1926, he got it so he could adjust the elements so you could go from light to dark toast. And basically, if you think about that, that was 1921. He patented it. 1926 is when he got it to basically the standards of what we have as a toaster. From the standards of what we think of a toaster, it really hasn't changed. I mean, the user experience is simple and perfect. Put the bread in, press it down, comes back up. It's really not that hard. And why expand on that? So many people have tried over the years to like add so much craziness and stuff, but really, do you need it? You
Well, and Joe, I mean, think about it. I mean, you have this single use device in your kitchen, and yeah, you could potentially be forced to use a toaster oven if you had to make toast. Um, but you don't necessarily need to. But really, I mean, if you didn't have a toaster or a toaster oven, how would you make toast? Do you make it on a skillet? Do you heat up an entire stove for one piece of toast? No, it's a single use device. The user experience is perfect. The bread fits in the right spot. It's got one button, and then some of them even have a little dial that'll say lighter toast, darker toast.
right.
Great user interface, excellent user experience. I think that is an example of usability and design coming together, and they can make some pretty wonderful looking toasters as well.
Sure. And you know what's so incredible is the fact that I never thought in my life that I would be looking at the history of toasters, but it is amazing how they really haven't changed that much in the years. Basically, it was the heating elements were on the side. Then they got the idea to put a metal box over top of it so you didn't burn your hands.
Yeah, I'm gonna call you out on that one, Joe. You are totally the guy to look up the history of the toaster. This just gave you a reason to share it with people, but you were definitely the guy that's like the toaster. Let me look that up. And you've been waiting to use this knowledge. You didn't look it up for the show. You've been waiting to use this knowledge, I'm sure.
You could only imagine the look on my wife's face when she walked by and I'm sitting on the couch researching toasters and she's like, really? Like, but then it's par for the course, right?
Mrs. K is a patient and wonderful woman. Hey,
That's great.
final thought on UX before we go to the next thing, which is awesome and we don't want to miss it. Joe, final thought on UX.
Well, let's just talk about UX. Sometimes, and let me speak from a designer standpoint. Now, sometimes we tend to overthink the process and the end product. I'll give you a perfect little quick example. Do you remember back in the early days of the web and all these websites were being made with anything but the kitchen sink on them? They had counters and word trees and whatever, and grandma's cookie recipe. And then about the mid 2000s, the website started scaling back and getting more minimal because the user experience was starting to take over. People were barking about what they wanted. They didn't want to have to dig around on websites and find what they need. So basically, we need to kind of keep that whole area in mind, or what that idea in mind is like, look, we don't need to add, it may look cool, but sometimes coolness just isn't what your end user is looking for. They're looking for perfect functionality with a hint of coolness. So if you can combine those two and not get, overzealous in your design or in your structure, it's perfect user experience.
Yeah, and Joe,
either be a toaster or a stick shift.
And I have to say that I think as we think about new products, either web products or mobile products or anything that we're going to be doing for our audience or our users, look around the world. See what works, see what a great user experience is, and see what a terrible user experience is. Right. We've talked about the Roku remote, which is a brilliant exercise and streamlined interface, versus the Verizon remote, which is like a level of torture in Dante's Inferno, right? Like there is anyway. But you know what? We have a treat for people today. You took a visit to your happy place.
I did.
Made a video, and people are going to see what your happy place is. So everybody stay tuned. Amanda's going to pull up a video. You're in for a treat.
Hey there. Well, it's kind of a dreary, rainy day here in good old Lakewood, Ohio. And I got a little bit of the rainy day blues. So I figured I'm going to go to the one place that always makes me happy and gets the old creative inspiration going. So why don't you join me on a little road trip today? What do you say? And here we are, kids. My favorite spot in Lakewood, Ohio, the famous Apple Jacks Toys. Okay, friends, welcome to Apple Jacks Toys.
The colors and the packaging on these vintage toys are just absolutely amazing, and I find them incredibly inspiring. Let me give you a quick look around. Obviously, one of my favorite spots in the whole store is the Star Wars section. Just check out all of these cool action figures, toys, notebooks, Dixie cups, and lunchboxes. Basically anything Kenner could place their Star Wars branding on between 1977 and 1985, they did. And boy was I a sucker for it. Another great piece that I noticed was this vintage cake pan set from the Wilton Company featuring Batman and Superman. I love the bold colors on this piece, plus I have such an affection for this vintage piece of bakeware. My aunt actually made me the Batman cake from this mold for my 6th birthday. Such a great selection of superhero action figures. Just look at all those colors. And how could you possibly go wrong with an Infinity Gauntlet lamp? I mean, come on already. Check out these vintage G.I. Joe figures. Their articulation and sculpts were so innovative for the time, plus their packaging was so vibrant and striking. It really jumped off the shelves then, and I believe it still does now. One can never go wrong with a Welcome Back Kotter, Vinnie Barbarino figure, also known as John Travolta, of course. A must-have for your collection.
I'm here with Amber, and she is the manager of Applejack's Toys, and I'm going to put her on the spot, and I'm going to ask her who her favorite content marketer is.
Oh, man, that's a tough one. Buddy Scalera?
All right.
Hey, Joe, that was awesome. That was so much fun. From the tour to her guessing, she just guessed my name.
Out of the blue. Did you notice my? Oh, right.
Yeah.
You could actually hear my eyes rolling.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So Applejack's is, where is it?
It is right in my neighborhood of Lakewood, Ohio, right on Madison. It's a great spot, and if you're coming into Cleveland or if you're hopping in for any of our content marketing events, please hit me up. I'll be glad to take you.
I can see how going there would literally relax you.
It's unbelievably relaxing. Not only from the, obviously your inner kid comes out as soon as you walk in, but, from a creativity standpoint, buddy, I'm always inspired by that vintage kind of packaging and the stuff that really excited me as a youngster growing up. We've always talked about Star Wars and everything like that. But, even before we went live today, I showed you a box of cereal that I bought because I just loved it.
You did.
I love the artwork on it, so that's the kind of stuff that inspires me. So if I'm, it was a perfect day. It was rainy. I needed to get out of the house for a little bit, go grab a coffee and just go walk around for, half an hour, 45 minutes, buy some toys and sneak them back in the house before my wife comes home from work. So she doesn't see that I've added to this mess down here. And, just get inspired. And I bring that creativity, that back with me as I sit back down in front of my computer and start, digging back into whatever I'm working on.
Yeah, and I think what it represents is there was somebody somewhere who was tasked with adapting an idea, like a movie or a television show or anything, into a different medium. And they had to think about the usability, the user experience, the packaging. And I think you can get a lot of inspiration just by looking at the real world and looking at the objects around you and saying, like, what is done well and survived the test of time, and then just what sort of faded away because it wasn't well designed.
Right. You're exactly right, buddy. I couldn't add more to that. I mean, just think of, I just think of as a designer, think of the guy that had to put that, like the experience, what wells up in me when I looked at that cake pan.
Yeah.
It automatically takes me back to my 6th birthday. Now, do you think that designer or that guy, that production artist that was sitting there putting that packaging together for layout to ship off to the printer to get this cake pan jabbed in it, do you think that he ever thought that it would be inspiring a nearly 50-year-old man 40 years later? No.
But you know what?
And
we don't always know what the impact of our work will be. And I think that's a bit of a humbling notion that 40 years later, it is still meaningful to somebody. So This means we're right at the minute mark here, where we are at one of the best parts of the show, where we actually show Joe's tax write-offs, and we call this part of the show "What's in the Box." Joe, can you roll the clip, Amanda? And I get that title from probably Mrs. K, who sees you come in carrying something and says, "What's in the box, JK?"
Oh, you know what, buddy? I've heard that so many times before we even came on, brought this to life on this live stream. But now I go all ninja style now, and I sneak it down through the back door of the house, down into my basement office. And I figure if I just kind of mix it in, it gets mixed in with the clutter and she won't see it. Now she'll watch this and I'm going to get busted, but I just told her. So anyway.
What's in the box, Joe? What'd you bring home?
I have to give a special lovely shout out to our CMI staffer and friend, Angela Vanucci. Angela gifted me with something this week, something that I always wanted since I was a youngster. And it was something very special to her that she won when she was in 6th grade, and she kept it all these years and decided to add it to the JK collection.
Oh, yes, my God.
This is an actual vintage 1977 Star Wars Dawn Post Darth Vader mask.
That is.
And this thing is just fantastic. She kept the box in perfect shape. As a matter of fact, I've actually took it out of the box to show everybody how cool this thing is. This is
that's so great.
Actual hard plastic and Velcros together, so it's a nice piece.
Look at that.
Really kind of covers your head. She had it. She came across it, and she's like, you know what? It sat in my closet long enough. I want to give it to somebody that's really going to appreciate it. And Angela, thank you so much. Much love. It's going to get a wonderful prominent placement here in the cave. So.
And it will be appreciated, right?
Yeah, I might actually just wear it for an episode. You never know. So, Buddy, I want to share my what's in the box with you today because I know you were very excited about a certain something that we were talking about earlier this week, and I would love for you to share it with our audience.
So, as a retro geek, Joe, I am passionate about all things retro, especially retro tech. I love retro tech. So I have this book, The Art of Atari, published by Dynamite, and there were two things that I wanted to draw out. One of them, right here, is an image by one of your favorite illustrators. I can't get it in there, but Ralph McQuarrie, Star Wars artist, drew boxes for the Atari. But as you recall, the Atari, being an 8-bit machine, was rather limited. So, the little pixels on the screen barely represented what you would see in the box art. But what they said was that the box art helped us as game players to imagine what it was supposed to be. So if it was supposed to be football or a battle game, if it was supposed to be Superman or some other game, the artwork was intended to help spur your imagination and improve the gameplay. And you know what? It did, because when you would open that box and you would see it, and those pixels were representations of it, it actually created a narrative in your mind and in your imagination. And I found that in the book to be an extremely salient point. What do you think, Joe?
I love it. I told you and I discussed it. I read that book as well, and we've discussed this, and it's perfect for this episode, Buddy, because it is a wonderful piece of user experience. Because what they did is during the design and packaging, they set a narrative in the end user's mind.
Yeah.
So they knew that they weren't going to be able to make a block of 8-bit pixels look like an actual Sherman tank. But what they did is they gave you some unbelievable artwork on the cover to create that narrative in your mind as you're playing the game. Yeah. So that is a wonderful step in the user experience process that Atari did. And that book is just a wonderful collection because the whole gamut, the whole run of Atari, from the time that they went from just the little label that just said what game it was, and then they started actually putting artwork on, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, so it's a terrific book published by Dynamite Entertainment called The Art of Atari. I love it. It's a fantastic, big, thick, Christmas style book. Now, before we get on to the the final part, Joe, I just want to call out two things. Number one, that is a fantastic shirt.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I figured we'd tear it up a little bit, go a little heavy metal today.
I just absolutely adore it. Now, Joe, you did make shirts for us. I have my shirt in the mail. We have not shown our shirts yet, but I understand our engineer may be wearing show colors today. I don't know if our engineer will pop on. Amanda Stadler is. There you go. Show us the shirt, Amanda. The shirt you got to.
Oh yeah, there it is.
All right.
Look at that bright smiling face.
I have to tell you that that actually looks like her. I think
yeah, it does.
It does. It
Good
does.
job.
We will have to put the shirts on, and I know that pretty soon, Joe, we'll both wear them for the show one day.
Yeah.
But also, I think they're going to be prizes at some point. So
For sure.
I don't know when, but I'm sorry I forgot to wear mine, and you didn't wear yours. But Amanda wore her colors, so thank you to Amanda. Joe, where can they find this particular live stream, and how can they subscribe to it?
All right. Well, we're going to make it really easy. We just created a new link for everybody to hop on over. Just type cmi.media/The Creative Show. That's going to take you right to our YouTube page with all of our playlists, the latest episodes, where you can like and subscribe there. And then, basically what you can do is find us on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. Mm-hmm. But I just want to make it super easy for everybody. So just think cmi.media/The Creative Show, and it's going to take you to every episode where you and I ramble on way too much about, geeky Star Wars stuff.
All right. So, Joe, where can they find you? On what channels are you most findable on?
I'm most findable at on Twitter at JK Kalinowski. You can find me there at JK Kalinowski on LinkedIn as well. And as always, wandering the halls of the Content Marketing Institute.
Fantastic. And you can find me on all channels at both Buddy Scalera, my name, and at Comic Book School. And you can also learn about the craft and business of making comics on comicbookschool.com. That's it for this episode. Joe, thank you for joining us. Amanda, thank you for engineering this. And thank all of you for providing the links and likes and comments for the show. We do this for you. We are glad you're enjoying the show. If nothing else, have a great week and stay creative. Thanks, everybody.